This video starts the amortization project. We'll do the data section, then we'll do the output section or the amortization table section, and then we'll come back and finish off the data section. If you don't have this worksheet that I provide for the course, you'll need to pause the video and construct your worksheet to look like this. These values are all just typed in. As you see, there are no formulas here. And we're going to start by entering the payment period. We want to allow the user to select from several payment periods. We don't want an error when the user enters the period, so we'll go up here and click on the Data tab. We'll go to Data Validation. And in Data Validation for this cell, we will change the value in Allow from any value to List. Then we'll type in our list, and our list will be yearly, comma, and no space, quarterly, comma, again no space, monthly, comma, bi-weekly, comma, weekly. Again, no spaces between the values in our list, just commas. Now I want to put an error alert in here. I want this to stop. If they try to put the wrong thing in, it's going to be a data entry error. I want to tell them to please select a payment period from the list, and then press Escape to continue. I help them get out of the error message in the fastest way possible. Say OK. You'll notice that that creates a combo box in this cell, and we'll select monthly just to continue working on the sheet. And you can see here that I've put notes in. These little red marks are notes that if you place your cursor on them, they'll provide you with some information. What we want to do is put in a smart label here that says what this cell contains. This cell contains the calculated payment, but we want to indicate whether it's the calculated monthly payment, calculated annual payment, biweekly, whatever. So we're going to create this smart label by typing the equal sign, and then in quotes we'll type calculated space quote, put in the ampersand, which is required for concatenation. Then we'll go up and grab whatever value's been placed in here, another space, another ampersand, another space, another quote, double quote, and a space, then payment, and a colon, and close quote. All right, and you can see that whatever we change this to, it will reflect the payment and provide a label that is correct, and that's the key. Next, we're going to calculate the payment here that provides the actual payment. We're going to allow the user to make additional payments for each period, and we want this to clearly indicate that this line contains the value that is the actual monthly payment to be made. So we'll do the same thing, actual in quotes, with a space, and then the ampersand, and a space, and we'll point to our period, a space, and then the ampersand, and a space, then a quote, and a space, then P-A-Y-M-E-N-T for payment, colon, and then we'll close it with a double quote again. So now we have our labeling there, which is correct. We'll continue to enter our smart labels here by entering the, again, correct label for the interest rate, the periodic interest rate that we're going to enter. And this will equal, in this case, we'll go get our value, and with concatenation, connect that to the ampersand, space, colon, we'll put in interest rate, and close the quote, We need a colon and close quote, and there we go. Then we'll put in some statements indicating the term of the loan. These read a little bit differently. We want this to read loan term in months, years, whatever. So we've entered all of our values with LY at the end in the payment period. So I can use a little Excel function here and type loan term in space, close quote, ampersand. Then I'm going to take the left portion of the period that I've put in here, and then it asks me for how many characters do I want. Well, I'm going to get the length of that because it's going to be different depending on whether it's yearly or biweekly. So I'll get the length, but whatever the length is, then what I want to do is subtract 2. I want to take the LY off. So that will take the LY off. And then I want to attach to that. So I use the ampersand for concatenation, and in quotes, I'll attach an S and then a colon and then close quotes, and that should do it. And then I get my loan term in months, and you can see if I change this to yearly, I get loan term in years. So that does what I want it to do. Next, I want to find out the loan lengths. We're going to pay extra on these loans. So even though the term of the loan will be, if it's in years, 30 years, it'll be 30 times 12 or 360 months. The actual length of the loan, if we're paying extra, will be less. So I want a label that will indicate that here we'll find the loan length. So I'll begin this by an equal sign, quotes, loan length in, and then go ahead and get my value. I want the left portion of the term that I've selected here, and I want that to be the length of the value in D5 minus the OY, or minus 2, and I'll close off my left statement there. Then I'll connect to that, but space ampersand, space, and I'll put in quotes, the S and the colon and close quotes, and press enter, and there I am. So for this value, I want to enter the loan length in years. So if I have it in months, I'm going to convert it to years. If I have it in quarters, I'm going to convert it to years. The only time I don't want to put anything in here is if the payment period is in years. I don't want 2 lines that say the same thing. So I'm going to use an if statement to look to see if D5 is equal to yearly. If it is, I'm going to leave this line blank. If it isn't, then I'm going to put in my loan length in years. It'll always be years. I'm going to convert whatever period that's not years to years and put it in here. So I'll press enter. That way, if I select yearly here, you'll see that that goes away, and I have loan length in years. Now for the last 2 smart labels, I'm going to come over here. I want to take my period value, so I'll say equals. I'll go up here and get the value in D5, and then connect to that quote, and then start with the space, savings with points. So I want to know the monthly savings in this case with points. This will help us understand whether or not we should purchase points or consider purchasing points as a part of this loan. Then I want to come down and calculate the months till I break even with points. In other words, how long does it take me to get back the money that I paid out, will have to pay out for points. So again, I'm going to start this and do my left as I've done before with my value in D5. You can point to it or just use that. Then I'm going to take the length of D5 and subtract 2 from that. Then I want to connect to that with the ampersand quote S to break even with points, colon, close quotes, press enter. So now I have months or years or quarters or whatever to break even with points. We want to know how many years it takes to break even with points unless the line above it is in years or the payment period is in years. Then we want it to stay blank just like we did before. So I'll enter equals and go with an if statement, and I'll look to C5 to see if it equals yearly. And if it does, I'll just leave it blank. If it doesn't, I'll type in the text years to break even with points. Press enter. There we have that. The next thing we need to do is provide the data that we need in order to calculate our monthly payment and then finally get to our actual payment. So the first thing I want to do is calculate the monthly interest rate in this case, or the periodic interest rate. It's going to depend on which period is selected. So if we have weeks, we're going to have to divide by 52, biweekly by 26, monthly by 12, quarters by 4, and so on. If it's annual, we're just going to leave it. So let's use a series of nested if statements to do that. I'll type if, and I'll look to D5, and if it equals weekly, then I will take D3, which is the annual interest rate, and I'll divide that by 52 weeks. That will give me the weekly interest rate. But if it's not that, then I will go ahead and write another if statement to look at D5 to see if it equals biweekly. I have to be careful to spell this correctly. Biweekly. If it is, then I want D3, and I want to divide that, in this case, by 26. If it's not, then I'm going to nest another if statement, and I'll look at D5 and see if it equals monthly. Need to be sure to put that in quotes and spell it correctly. If it is, then I want to take D3 and divide that by 12. Then I want to take a look and see if D5 is equal to quarterly. And if it is, I want to divide D3 by 4. Otherwise, it must be yearly. That's all that's left. So I'm just going to take D3 because that's the yearly interest rate that I have stated there. Then I need to match all my parentheses. Let Excel do that for me. There's the final black one that matches the first one. Press enter and I get my interest rate. And you can see if I change it to yearly, for example, it will change quarterly back to monthly. Next, I want to get my loan term in the appropriate number of periods. To accomplish this, I'll do what I did in the cell above, except I'll multiply. So I'll use my if function, and I'll take a look at the value in D5 and check to see if it is equal to weekly. If it is, I will take the value in D4 and multiply it times the 52 weeks. If it's not, I'll look again at the value in D5 using the if statement to see if it's biweekly. If it is, then I'll take the value in D4 and multiply it times 26. If it's not, I'll use an if statement to look again in D5 to see if it equals monthly. If it does, then I'll take the value in D4 and multiply it times 12. If not, I'll use an if statement again to look at the value in D5 to see if it equals quarterly. If it does, then I'll take the value in D4 and multiply it times 4. If it doesn't, then it must be yearly. That's all that's left. So I'll just take the value that's in D4. Now I'll balance my function with parentheses. There's the last one. Press enter, and there you have that. The next thing we need to do is let the user select from beginning or end of period. That's something that the payment function in Excel needs to know when to compound the interest. So let's go ahead and use data validation here. So from the data tab, we'll select validation, data validation. We'll go back over here, change it from any value to a list, put 2 values in our list, put the word beginning, comma, no space, and end. And we'll make this a data entry error. And we'll put in an error message that says, please select a value from the list. Press escape to continue. Say OK. Now you can see that they have an option here. We'll select end just for these, for our purposes. Now we'll use the payment function in Excel to calculate our payment. We have all of the values that we need here. Equals PMT. Then it wants to know the rate, and the rate needs to match the period. So here's our periodic interest rate. Then the number of periods, and here are the number of periods since we're in months. The present value of our loan is the amount borrowed, the principal amount. We will not put in a future value, so we'll just put 2 commas next to each other. Then we need to decide whether we're going to compound this at the beginning of the period or the end of the period. So a 0 for end of the period, a 1 for the beginning of the period. So I'll put an if statement in here, and I'll take a look at my value in cell D6. And if it equals beginning, then I'll put in a 1. Otherwise, I'll enter a 0. And I'll close off my if statement with a parenthesis and close off my payment function with a parenthesis. And I get the monthly payment of $805 negative. It's an outflow of cash. It's a payment. Now we may want to let the user enter another value in this cell to add to the payment amount. This additional amount needs to be a negative value because it does represent a cash outflow. To do this, we'll go to the Data tab and we'll select Data Validation. Data Validation, and from the list, we'll select a decimal, so they could enter cents in there if they wanted to. And we want a decimal value that is less than or equal to 0. That will give us a negative value or allow for no contribution. And if they make a mistake, we want to stop them and we want to warn them. This is another data entry error. And we want to explain to them what they've done wrong. So we'll tell them the additional amount is an outflow of cash. So it must be entered as a negative value. Please enter a negative value press Escape to continue. Okay. And let's say they want to increase the payment by $100. The actual monthly payment amount is simply going to be the amount calculated plus any additional that we decide to pay in. Add those two together. That completes the data section for now. We're going to work on the amortization table itself. Then when we're done with that, we'll come back and finish the data section and then do the points section as well.